Ethan Hale, the charismatic and successful CEO of Hale Enterprises, strode through the grand lobby of his luxurious New York hotel chain. Despite his wealth and power, a shadow of the past loomed over his heart. 5 years ago, he lost the greatest love of his life, Mia Carter, under circumstances so painful that even the thought of it made his chest tighten. As he moved through the polished marble expanse, his attention was momentarily caught by the buzz of activity, and then his world stopped. At the reception desk stood Mia. Time seemed to slow as Ethan's gaze locked onto her. She looked radiant, her voice soft as she spoke to the clerk. Next to her was a man holding the hand of a young girl with bouncing curls, the three of them forming a picture of a perfect family. Ethan's heart clenched painfully. Had she built a new, happy life without him? The thought felt like a dagger to his chest. Fighting the surge of emotions threatening to consume him, Ethan waited until they stepped away before approaching the reception desk. His voice, calm but edged with tension, broke through the hum of the lobby. "Who was that woman who just checked in?" he asked, his tone controlled but firm. The receptionist hesitated, glancing at the screen. "That was Ms. Carter. She's staying with 2 guests in one of our standard rooms." A standard room. For Mia, it seemed odd. Ethan nodded curtly, though his mind raced with questions. Before walking away, he gave an instruction: find a reason to upgrade them to the presidential suite, and keep this between us. Meanwhile, Mia was unaware that Ethan had seen her, let alone that he was the owner of the hotel. After settling into her room, she left quickly for another destination, one she had been dreading for years: the prison. Inside those cold, unyielding walls was her younger brother Sam, serving a sentence for the tragedy that had shattered both of their lives. When she saw Sam's face through the glass partition, her heart ached. He looked tired, his eyes weary but still holding the determination she remembered. As they spoke through the phone, Sam wasted no time bringing up a subject that Mia had avoided for years. "It's Claire's birthday soon," he said, his voice laced with regret. "Go to her grave, Mia. For me. She didn't deserve what happened." Mia's throat tightened as she nodded. "Neither did you, Sam. None of us did." Sam's expression hardened. "Then do this, please." Later that day, the sky was a dull gray, reflecting Mia's heavy heart as she arrived at the cemetery. Each step toward Claire's grave felt heavier than the last. Kneeling beside the headstone, she placed a small bouquet of flowers. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I am so sorry, Claire." The memories of that fateful day flooded back, and tears slipped down her cheeks. But before she could collect herself, the sound of footsteps shattered the stillness. She turned and froze. Standing a few feet away were Ethan and his mother, Vivian. Vivian's expression hardened into one of anger the moment her eyes fell on Mia. "How dare you come here?" Vivian spat, her voice sharp and venomous. "Haven't you done enough to this family?" Mia rose to her feet, stammering, I wanted to pay my respects. I didn't mean to cause—" "You don't belong here." Vivian cut her off, her tone icy and unyielding. "Leave." Ethan remained silent, his face a mask of unreadable emotions. Seeing Mia again stirred a storm within him. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and distant. "Why are you even here, Mia? You don't belong anymore." The words stung, but Mia didn't let them show. With her head held high, she turned and walked away, her steps quickening as the first drops of rain began to fall. By the time she reached the road, the drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. Her coat did little to shield her from the cold, and her body trembled as she trudged along the deserted path. Ethan, watching her shadow from afar, felt guilt creeping straight into his heart. After arranging a car for his mother to return home, he silently drove after her. Stopping the car on the sidelines, he rolled down the window. Pulling up beside her, he rolled down the window. "Get in," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mia hesitated but didn't stop. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice defiant despite her soaked and shivering form. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not asking." Reluctantly, Mia climbed into the passenger seat. The air inside the car was thick with unspoken words as Ethan drove. But the silence didn't last long. "Why did you come back, Mia?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Haven't you done enough damage?" Mia's hands clenched in her lap. "You think I wanted this?" she shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "You think any of this was easy for me?" Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You left, Mia. Without a word. You moved on, built a life, and left me to pick up the pieces." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she held them back. "You don't know anything about what happened. You don't know what I went through." When they arrived back at the hotel, Mia got out without another word, slamming the door behind her. Ethan watched her disappear into the lobby, his emotions a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and longing. Later that night, Ethan spotted Mia again in the lobby. This time she was with the man and the little girl. The man draped a coat over her shoulders while the girl clung to her hand, laughing. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Had she really moved on? Was this her new family? He turned away, retreating to his office, his mind consumed by questions. The image of Mia with the man and child lingered, leaving him to assume the worst, that she had found happiness without him. The tension between Ethan and Mia hadn't subsided since their stormy reunion. If anything, it had intensified. Ethan couldn't shake the image of her with the man and child in the hotel lobby. The questions swirling in his mind were relentless, and when a new piece of information crossed his desk the next morning, it only fueled his obsession. Mia was now the creative director for Carter & Wells, a firm collaborating with Hale Enterprises on a high-profile project. It was a position that would inevitably force them into close proximity. Initially, Ethan had planned to send his deputy to represent Hale Enterprises at the upcoming business gala. The event was set to gather the city's most influential figures, and Mia would be there as part of her new role. But the moment Ethan learned of her attendance, he'd changed his mind. He needed answers, and he wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. The gala was a glittering affair, with opulent chandeliers casting warm light over the elegantly dressed crowd. Ethan arrived late, his commanding presence immediately drawing attention. Heads turned as he entered, his sharp suit and steely gaze cutting through the room. He scanned the sea of faces until his eyes landed on Mia. She stood near the bar, a vision in a sleek, dark dress that only accentuated her elegance. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. When their eyes met, Mia's expression froze for a moment before she turned away, composing herself. Ethan wasted no time closing the distance between them. His voice was low, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "It's good to see you've moved on so easily," he said, the bitterness barely concealed. Mia turned to him, her gaze steady despite the turmoil roiling inside her. "You've made your assumptions, as always," she replied coolly. The air between them crackled with tension, their words sharp enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "Assumptions?" Ethan's tone was biting. "You're here with your perfect little family, Mia. What else am I supposed to think?" Mia's defenses faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "What you think doesn't matter, Ethan," she said, her voice quieter now but no less resolute. "It never has." Their exchange drew curious glances and whispers from other attendees. Mia felt the weight of their scrutiny, but she refused to back down. She excused herself, walking away with her head held high, leaving Ethan standing alone, his frustration mounting. Later that evening, Ethan found himself lingering in the shadows of the hotel lobby, his thoughts a chaotic mess. He had hoped the gala would give him clarity, but instead it left him with more questions. Ethan watched as Mia entered the lobby with a man and a little girl. They were laughing and chatting, looking genuinely happy. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could turn away, something unexpected happened. The little girl tugged on the man's sleeve and asked, "Daddy, can I talk to Mommy now?" The man nodded and handed her the phone. The little girl's clear, sweet voice echoed as she spoke into the phone. "Mommy, I miss you. When are you coming to pick me up?" Ethan's world tilted. Daddy? Mommy? The truth hit him like a freight train. The man wasn't Mia's husband, and the little girl wasn't her child. Confusion and relief washed over him, but they were quickly replaced by suspicion. If they weren't Mia's family, then who were they? And why had she let him misunderstand? As Ethan watched them disappear into the elevator, a new determination ignited within him. Mia's life was far more complicated than he had assumed, and he needed to know the truth. Not just about the man and the child, but about everything that had happened 5 years ago. Why had she left? And why had she returned? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Whatever secrets Mia was keeping, he was going to uncover them. And this time, she wouldn't be able to run away. Ethan couldn't shake the gnawing questions that Mia's return had planted in his mind. The revelation that the man and the little girl weren't her family only deepened the mysteries surrounding her. Determined to find the truth, Ethan began quietly investigating Mia's life. What he discovered left him both stunned and enraged. Through his discreet inquiries, Ethan uncovered the role his mother, Vivian, had played in Mia's sudden disappearance 5 years ago. Documents, phone records, and testimonies painted a damning picture of manipulation. Vivian had weaponized Mia's guilt over Claire's death and Ethan's injury, feeding her lies and fear. Vivian had told Mia that Ethan despised her for the chaos she had brought into their lives. "He wants nothing to do with you," she had claimed. Mia, already overwhelmed by grief and guilt, had believed Vivian without question. It became clear to Ethan that his mother had acted not out of protection, but out of a desire to maintain control over their family's image. Furious, Ethan confronted Vivian in her sprawling estate. The room was filled with tension as he laid out the evidence of her actions. Vivian, however, remained unapologetic. "I did what I had to do," she said coldly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "She was dragging us all down. You didn't need her." Ethan's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "What I needed was the truth, and you took that from me. From us." Vivian's expression didn't waver. "The truth wouldn't have helped you then. I was protecting this family." Ethan stared at her, disbelief etched into his face. "Protecting us, or protecting yourself? You've destroyed something you had no right to touch." Without waiting for a response, he walked out, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders. Meanwhile, Mia was struggling with her own secrets. What was supposed to be a brief work trip in New York had extended far longer than anticipated. The added time forced her to make a decision she had been dreading. She brought her son, Liam, to live with her. Liam was a lively and curious 5-year-old, and his presence brought light to Mia's otherwise stressful days. But with Liam in New York, Mia's anxiety grew. She knew that if Ethan discovered Liam's existence and his striking resemblance to him, everything would change. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. One crisp afternoon, Mia decided to take Liam to the park. The fresh air and laughter of children playing seemed to ease her nerves. She watched Liam climb onto the jungle gym, his laughter echoing through the space, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax. But across the park, Ethan stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the boy. He had been walking through the area, lost in thought, when the sound of familiar laughter drew his attention. His gaze landed on Liam, and his breath caught. The boy's features, the same piercing eyes, the sharp jawline, were unmistakable. He looked like a miniature version of Ethan himself. Ethan's mind raced. Could it be possible? Was this boy his son? He stepped forward, his heart pounding, but stopped himself before Mia noticed him. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. Too many emotions churned within him. Anger at her secrecy, hope for what this could mean, and fear of the answers he might receive. He watched them from a distance as Mia took Liam's hand and led him toward the swings. The tenderness in her gestures struck a chord deep within Ethan, but the questions burned brighter than ever. Ethan Hale stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. His mind was a storm, a maelstrom of anger, regret, and determination. The truth he had uncovered about his mother's betrayal had left him reeling. Vivian had driven Mia away with lies, blaming her for Claire's death and exploiting her guilt. And now, there was Liam, a boy who looked so much like him that it couldn't be a coincidence. Ethan's chest tightened. He had a son, a child he hadn't known existed, and Mia had kept him a secret all these years. He could still see Liam's face in his mind, the way the boy's laughter had echoed through the park. Ethan's emotions were a tangled mess, but one thing was clear. He couldn't sit idly by. He had to confront Mia, demand answers, and claim the time he had lost with his son. Later that evening, Ethan arrived at Mia's hotel suite. He didn't knock. His heart pounded as he slid the key card. Replacement slid down its own hinges and acquired discreetly from the front desk, into the lock, and stepped inside. Mia was sitting on the couch, her laptop open, papers scattered across the coffee table. She looked up, startled. "Ethan?" Her voice wavered, a mixture of surprise and apprehension. What are you doing here?" He closed the door behind him, his eyes burning with intensity. "We need to talk." "Now." Mia's heart raced. She had seen this look in his eyes before. A storm brewing, one that couldn't be contained. She stood, her hands trembling slightly. "You can't just barge in here like this." "Don't." His voice was low, almost a growl. "Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Mia. Not after everything I've learned." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know what my mother did. I know how she lied to you, manipulated you, drove you away." Mia's defenses faltered, her composure cracking under the weight of his words. "Ethan, And Liam," he continued, his voice softening but still heavy with emotion. "He's my son, isn't he?" The room seemed to freeze. Mia's lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, her shoulders slumping as the fight drained out of her. "Yes," she whispered. "He's your son." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of emotions washing over him. Relief, anger, joy, and sorrow all tangled together. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mia's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was scared," she said, her voice trembling. "Your mother made it clear that I wasn't welcome. She said you hated me, Ethan. She said you blamed me for everything. I couldn't bring a child into that." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. "You should have trusted me," he said, his voice raw. "You should have come to me." "I wanted to protect him," Mia cried. "From your family, from everything. I thought I was doing the right thing." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice rising. "You took away 5 years, Mia. 5 years of my son's life that I'll never get back." Mia's tears spilled over, but she stood her ground. "You think it was easy for me? You think I didn't want to tell you? Every day I wondered if I made the right choice, but I did what I thought was best." The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to her, his expression softening. "I want to be part of his life, Mia. I need to be. He's my son." Mia wiped her tears, her voice barely a whisper. "He deserves to know you." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Mia hesitated before opening it and saw her brother, who was released from prison last week, Sam, standing there. His face was pale, his eyes rolled back with worry. "We have a problem," Sam said, stepping inside. "Some people from my past, they found out where we are, and they know about Liam." Mia's heart dropped. "What? How?" Sam shook his head. "It doesn't matter. We need to leave. Now." Ethan stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "No one's going anywhere," he said firmly. "If Liam's in danger, I'll handle it." Mia looked at Ethan, her eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. But could she trust him to protect them? The shadows of the past had come crashing into their present. Figures from Sam's dangerous history had emerged, threatening not only him but Mia and, most terrifyingly, Liam. Ethan Hale, who had once been consumed by his own pain, now stood resolute. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth or claiming the years he'd lost with his son. This was about protecting the family he'd only just realized he had. It began with an anonymous note slipped under Mia's door. The message was chilling. "I know exactly where you, your sister, and your nephew are. You can't escape." Sam's pale face confirmed her worst fears. These weren't idle threats. The men he'd crossed in his past had found them. Ethan didn't hesitate. "You're moving to my penthouse," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Ethan, this isn't your fight," Mia protested, her voice trembling. "It is my fight," he interrupted, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "Because it's about Liam. It's about you, and I will not let anyone hurt my family." Sam, guilt-ridden, tried to object. "They're after me, Ethan. Ethan's piercing gaze silenced him. "They're after all of us now, and I don't run from threats, not when my son is involved." Ethan wasted no time marshaling his considerable resources. His security team, the best in the business, swept the hotel and reinforced every entry point. Surveillance was heightened, and Mia and Liam were never left unguarded. But Ethan knew this wouldn't be enough. He needed to confront the danger head-on. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Late one night, a group of men attempted to breach the hotel's private entrance. Alarms blared as security intercepted them, but Ethan refused to stay on the sidelines. He descended to the lobby, his presence commanding even amidst the chaos. When the leader of the group was cornered, Ethan stepped forward. His voice was low and lethal. "You made a mistake coming here," he said, his words cutting through the air like steel. "You thought you could threaten my family and walk away. You thought wrong." The man smirked, but Ethan's unyielding glare didn't waver. "If you so much as think about coming near them again," Ethan continued, his voice a growl, "I will destroy everything you hold dear." The intruders were swiftly apprehended, and Ethan's connections ensured they wouldn't pose a threat again. But the incident left Mia shaken. That night, as the city quieted, she stood by the window, watching the lights below, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Ethan joined her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone anymore, Mia," he said softly. "I'm here. For you." For Liam. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to him. "I've been so afraid for so long," she admitted. "But with you, I feel safe." In the aftermath, Ethan knew there was one final confrontation he had to face. He went to see Vivian, the woman who had caused so much pain, under the guise of protecting their family. The atmosphere in the room was icy as Ethan laid everything bare. "You lied to me," he said, his voice steady but brimming with emotion. "You stole 5 years of my son's life from me. From us." Vivian's expression hardened. "I did what I thought was best. She was a distraction, a danger." "No," Ethan shot back. "She was everything, and you took her from me." Vivian's silence spoke volumes. For the first time, Ethan saw the cracks in her facade, the fear behind her steely exterior. "I won't let you hurt them again," he said firmly, his voice resolute. "Mia and Liam are my family now. I hope you can accept this family too." With that, he turned away. His mother, Mrs. Vivian, leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. A wave of regret and emptiness began to wash over her. The following weeks were a time of healing. The danger had passed, but the bonds between Ethan, Mia, and Liam only grew stronger. Ethan embraced fatherhood with a fierceness that surprised even him, finding joy in the simplest moments with Liam, reading bedtime stories, teaching him how to throw a baseball, and hearing him call him Dad for the first time. Mia, too, found herself letting go of the fear and guilt that had weighed her down. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a future, one filled with hope and love. One sunny afternoon, the three of them stood in Central Park, watching Liam chase after a kite. Mia leaned against Ethan, her head resting on his shoulder. "I never thought we'd get here," she murmured. Ethan kissed the top of her head. "We fought for this, and I'll keep fighting, for you, for him, for us." As Liam's laughter filled the air, they both smiled, knowing that the shadows of the past had finally been replaced by the light of a brighter future. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Your support and connection mean the world to us and are a tremendous source of motivation. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Which moment touched your heart the most? Share your favorite scenes in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the heartfelt stories we have coming up. Let's continue creating stories that touch hearts and bring us closer together. Thank you for being a part of our community.